This isn't about a preference, rather about the disconnect. It would be equally jarring if I were to plug a cartridge into my Super Nintendo and somehow it was, I don't know, Cyberpunk 2077. Man, that would look awesome on a CRT. I have to find a way of doing that. This has been the most challenging video to record. You have no idea. But you will. Stick around. But first, a quick explaining to get you up to speed with where we are. Germany! I'm Bill, I'm British, and I'm living here in Germany, where I was surprised to discover that Bill can be mispronounced. The first place I lived in Germany, over a decade ago now, was a town called Villingen-Schwenningen, more specifically Villingen. These pictures are from the Villinger Fasnet, or Fastnacht, the yearly carnival that takes place before Lent. When British people have Pancake Day to use up all their butter and sugar before their period of religious fasting, Germans drink all the beer, in costumes. They've been doing this in Villingen since at least 1467, and they love it. And why wouldn't you? It's not a big tourist place, but I promise if you go to one Villinger Fasnet, you'll remember it for the rest of your life. But this is a video games channel, so why am I telling you this? I mean, because it's cool, obviously. But Villingen was, like many German towns in the south, a manufacturing town. They were the home of SABA, or, if you're fancy, Schwarzwälder Apparatbauanstalt August Schwersonne GmbH. They made TVs. They made this TV. This is my 30-year-old 33-inch beast of a CRT TV, made in Germany. In 1995 you'd have paid 2,000 Deutschmarks for this. I picked it up for €10 from someone who was glad to be rid of it. It's pure nostalgia. It obviously reminds me of my time in Villingen, but also of time spent in front of TVs just like this when I was around 10 years old, bathing in the warm glow of the screen with friends and family, gaming together at weekends or watching movies at Christmas. Even if CRT TVs had no practical purpose today, I would still love them for the memories they bring back. But to us retro gamers, these things aren't just special for their nostalgia, but also for their functionality. You see, games designed from the 1970s right up into the 2000s were designed for exactly this type of display. They smoothed pixels together in a way that would actually increase the visual quality far and above what the jagged edges look like on today's LCD screens. And there are various sort of colour blending and transparency effects and that kind of thing that really only work on this kind of display. They also smoothed out the jagged edges of early 3D games. They can manage deep blacks, beautiful colour reproduction, and gaming with zero latency. The scanline technology and the strict timing is what made light gun games possible, like Duck Hunt. It's just not possible to play Duck Hunt on an LCD screen. At least, not with the original hardware. So I love playing original 90s consoles on this thing. But I wanted to see, what else could I experience from my CRT? Apart from just being the best retro gaming experience with original hardware, what else can this 30-year-old device offer today? Well, last week, my CRT just happened to get a big upgrade in a very small package. This is a Raspberry Pi 4B, and hanging out the top of it is the RGB-Pi. You simply plug the cable into the GPIO headers of the Pi, you plug the SCART end into your TV, you load RGBPi OS and a bunch of games onto an SD card, you plug in a controller, and hey presto, you've got retro gaming on a CRT emulated by the Raspberry Pi 4 and displayed perfectly through the RGB-Pi. Let me show you a little bit of how it works. Okay, so here's the main interface of the RGB-Pi OS. You've got your systems you can choose from, pretty straightforward. So let's just play through a couple and see how it looks. There's no such thing as perfect colours on the NES, I don't think. It's PAL and NTSC systems had different colours. It looked different on different TVs. I've gone for a very colourful palette. As I switch to a European game running 50 Hz, such as this Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, you can see in the logo at the bottom right there, you'll notice that my camera footage is flickering because my phone is recording the screen, that's set to 60 Hz. Well, that proves that the RGB-Pi itself is outputting native 50 Hz to the TV. It was 60 Hz on the last game we were trying because that was an NTSC game. Having a look at Yoshi's Island, I've put the frame counter on the screen so you can see that it's running quite happily at 60 frames per second using the SuperFX 2 chip. The Raspberry Pi 4 has absolutely no trouble emulating this. This isn't news. And outputting to a CRT with the RGB-Pi makes no difference to that. And these are all the emulators that came with RGB-Pi OS. So they're already kind of optimized and set up to run perfectly on the Pi 4 without any necessary tweaks on my side. I don't have much PlayStation wise, I don't play an awful lot of PlayStation, but I've just got Symphony of the Night on here, obviously will run fine. It's not exactly a demanding PlayStation game. We'll see a little bit more from the PlayStation later. If you want to play Symphony of the Night on a CRT, it seems pretty perfect to me. The game itself, a little bit pricey, let's be honest. As for Sega Saturn, you can put a Sega Saturn emulator on it, sure, but it's not really what I consider playable, at least not for Nights into Dreams. Maybe there are some 2D games on Saturn that you'd have a bit more luck with, but should I put the frame rate counter on there? It claims it's getting sort of nearly 40. Yeah, auto frame skip switched on, but even so, this is not a great Nights into Dreams experience. Okay, with a little bit of tinkering that I'm definitely just going to cut out. Nintendo 64 works great with a Retrobit controller. You just play it like a real Nintendo 64. The game's as smooth as you like. One of the more challenging things to emulate on Perfect Dark is when you hit this radiation here on this level and the screen starts to get all blurry. The Switch version can't do it, the Switch port of Perfect Dark, but the Raspberry Pi 4 with RGB-Pi, quite happy. Horrendously blurry. Second thing it has trouble with, of course, CamSpy. And here, no trouble whatsoever. I'm getting some frame rate drops right now. You can see it says 48 down there, but this is Perfect Dark. So I'm really kind of pushing this as hard as I can in the Nintendo 64 test. As soon as the dizzy effect wears off, we're back up to a nice healthy, almost 60 frames per second. Give it something a little bit easier like Super Mario 64 and without a frame rate counter at the bottom of the screen, you're probably really not going to notice anything about the performance. And seriously, if you want to emulate Nintendo 64, Raspberry Pi 4 is pretty much exactly the thing you want. And of course, on the CRT, it looks great. Now obviously Game Boy Advance, it will do fine. It's quite happy doing the Sega Master System, Mega Drive, obviously nothing complicated there.
File select.
I'd say the limit of its abilities is probably the Sega Dreamcast. Well, it's a little bit over what it can reasonably do.
Attention all units. Suspect soon heading south. Block all major roads and capture the suspect.
Tell you what though, that's better than I thought it was. It's not perfect. It's gonna judder. But this isn't bad. And one thing you could bear in mind is that this system supports overclocking. Even inside the RGB-Pi OS as standard, there is an overclock option that you can just switch on and it will overclock your Raspberry Pi 4. I have not turned that on, and I'm not going to turn that on. And the reason is that I haven't bought any kind of cooler for my Raspberry Pi, and I don't really want to risk it. But I tell you what, this isn't far off. And with frame skip set to auto, we're keeping sort of mostly around 60. With the gun truck behind us, we're dropping as low as 42. I would say playable. Dreamcast is playable. It's not spot on, but it's playable. And if you were to actually remember to order the heatsink, I reckon you get there. A little bit of overclock. Really not far off. So cool, right? Emulation on a CRT. We could just stop there and go home, but my Wii's been doing that for years. If I just wanted emulators on a CRT TV, well, I'd press the power button on my Wii and I'd enjoy emulators on a CRT TV. But to be fair, the RGB-Pi does it incredibly well. The Pi is more powerful than the Wii, so of course it's going to support more systems such as the Dreamcast and the PlayStation. And the big draw of the RGB-Pi OS in conjunction with the cable is it automatically switches resolutions as needed. No fiddling with borders or timing issues or whatever, you just get the output that the game intended to put out. I also really like the inclusion of Kodi as a nice little value add. This just comes with it. And it's much better than Wii MC, which is still the best media center you're going to get on the Wii. A lot of plugins don't work on this version of Kodi, it's kind of outdated, but I was able to get Jellyfin going, so I can just stream some of my cartoons over the network and watch TV like it's the 90s.
Well, out there and be your goody-goody self and all the people will vote for her.
Maybe you could try being nice.
Me? Nice? I've never been nice in my life.
I have a Chromecast plugged into this TV over a cheap HDMI to SCART converter, mostly because I think it's funny that when I open up my phone I've got SABA as a cast option. But also because it's just kind of cozy watching stuff on a CRT and I wanted a solution to be able to do that. But the quality on it is awful. The Chromecast only knows how to do 720p or 1080p widescreen. The cheap converter converts that then to 480i and does not a great job of it, and there's interference and it's bad. But this is native 480i all the way through, and content from the era just looked great on it.
Boss of the Mushroom Kingdom.
If you're so eager to rule my people, why don't you do it the right way?
Bad King Dad? Are you kidding?
What are you laughing at?
There's an election coming up. Let the people decide who they want.
RGB-Pi OS is well presented and really simple to use, although I did hit a snag with it pretty early on. My Wi-Fi network uses UTF-8 characters, because in this house we love Doctor Who, including the episode The Bells of St. John, which, if you all remember, anyone who connects to a network with an SSID like this one gets their soul sucked into the Wi-Fi. RGB-Pi did not connect to my Wi-Fi network. But that's okay. The Wii doesn't like this network either, so I've created a hidden network that I can use for devices that don't like my weird network name. But there's no option in RGB-Pi OS to type in a network name. I asked on the Discord how one would connect to a hidden SSID, but nobody answered. And I suspect the reason that nobody answered is because they would say that you can't. But in the real world, this is just a Linux computer, and you do whatever you want with a Linux computer. But RGB-Pi made a sort of slightly odd design decision, at least in my opinion. The interface runs as the root user. Full systems access for the interface and RetroArch, but they didn't allow the user to get root access. Look, you can drop out into a Linux terminal really easily and log in, but sudo just says no. The user just doesn't have root access. And on Debian Linux, on which this is based, you need root access in order to connect to a Wi-Fi network in the terminal. But there's a fix for this. And from what I've heard, the RGB-Pi developers don't like you discussing it in their Discord. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I don't know. But this channel is a free speech zone. I found a set of scripts called RGBPi-Extra on GitHub. I whacked it on the SD card, made a Wi-Fi hotspot with my phone for the setup, and away we go! Root access! This allowed me to manually edit the config files for WPA Supplicant and get myself online on my hidden SSID. This isn't a tutorial video. Check out the README files on the RGBPi-Extra GitHub, and if you have any questions I'll answer them in the comments. Point is, we're now firing on all cylinders. Our little Raspberry Pi SCART emulation box is online, and I can copy my ROMs over the network and whatever else. Cool. But you've seen the title of this video, and you know exactly what I did next. Moonlight streaming, baby! RGBPi-Extra includes, hidden away in the GitHub, an installer for Moonlight. Moonlight streams games over the network from your PC with an NVIDIA graphics card, and it just so happens that I have one of those. Hello everyone who skipped to this chapter! While you're here clicking around, subscribe button's right there. Also, go back to the start of the video if you want to learn about Carnival traditions in South Germany. But if that's not your bag, here's where I make good on the promise in the video title. Just enable game streaming in GeForce Experience, put in the pin to connect, and here we are! Steam on the CRT. It's time, finally, to play some Cyberpunk 2077, not as it was meant to be played, but as it should have been meant to be played. I don't know if I can get across to you just how cool this feels right now. So like Cyberpunk, as much as any like well-made 3D game is pretty happy in any aspect ratio you might want to use, and this even includes 4:3. This is by far the most graphically impressive video game I've ever seen on a CRT TV. The text is fuzzy, you can't see all the details, but this is gorgeous. And like all the controls and everything just feels great. And what's impressing me here as well is that Moonlight's even forwarding the rumble commands. So my controller's rumbling as I play this. Okay, in my defense here, I'm playing with the sound off, and it's also been a hot minute since I played Cyberpunk with a controller rather than mouse and keyboard. I'm also not going to be playing much Cyberpunk 2077 like this. Like, of course, I'm going to be playing this on my. I'm going to be playing more of this on my OLED, but there is a feel you don't get from anything but a CRT, and something about the, I don't know, the aesthetic of Cyberpunk, it just fits it really well. You know, we get a little bit of juddering with the streaming over the network, but it's pretty good. Largely because it's... Get rid of you. Largely because it's only got a stream like 480p. You know? Just get outside into a brighter area in Night City during the daytime. I don't know, you know, what's the practical purpose of this? Nothing. But what's the practical purpose of any of this? It's a game. It's about joy. And this right here, pretty joyful. Like there's no world in which this is the optimal way to play Cyberpunk 2077. Not really. There's a reason we moved on from CRTs. But I'm digging this. The nonsense of it. And also the surprise at just how playable this is. Sure, whatever. It just looks like low-res Cyberpunk 2077, and that's some of what it is, but that's not all of what it is, you know? I can't show you just how lovely this is, but also terrible. Text's pretty tricky to read though. Cyberpunk supports natively 640 by 480. We don't have to run it in a high resolution and convert it down to be able to see it on the CRT TV. We can run it natively at 640 by 480, and it's interlaced 480i, but it is still something that the TV can kind of display. This TV's 30 years old. If TV technology never changed, we will be looking at this thinking, this is the best games will ever look. Okay, I'm saying it right now, you haven't played Cyberpunk 2077 until you've played it on a cathode ray tube. No, okay, that's obviously ridiculous. But this feels like nothing else, man. The combination of the very new game and the very old technology like this, just, it feels like a sort of alternate history almost, you know? And it's lovely and it's joyful and it's utterly, utterly pointless. But you know what? It's playable. It shouldn't be. Power just went out. That's weird. So, what happened there then? Well, my guess is that we overloaded the electrical circuit. Apparently running a gaming PC at full tilt at the same time as a big CRT TV from the mid-90s is a little bit too much for the electrics in this old house to handle. In the process, we also blew the power supply for one of my studio lights, so going to get a replacement for that. In the meantime, what does that mean for this video? Well, the lighting's a little worse, and maybe that's another reason you shouldn't play Cyberpunk 2077 on a CRT. So let's try Forza Horizon 4. You can see the problem pretty much straight away there in the logos at the start, that this is not 4.3. Forza Horizon forces you to play it in 16.9. And that's true of a lot of games. There are a lot of games that are designed to work in 16.9 and won't work in anything less. They often support wider resolutions, so Forza Horizon 4 will be quite happy if you bump up the wide, but it doesn't want less wide. It won't go less wide than 16.9, which kind of makes sense with modern displays. But even with this old display for the 90s, we do have a way to kind of make it work. We can just change the format, 16.9, there we go. And we've got the black bars, but it looks all right. Turn streamer mode on and then we can have the game sound. All right, coolly cool. Yeah, so this looks all right. You don't really want to be playing 16.9 games on most 90s TVs. There were some widescreen CRTs released, but are they really that popular now? I don't feel like it. I feel like most of the content you want to be displaying on a CRT these days is like 4.3. It's old 90s consoles, you know? And games only really started being widescreen Wii, really. The Wii is when it was first expected that you would have a 16.9 screen and all games started to support it. There were exceptions. Perfect Dark on the Nintendo 64. Quite happy with 16.9. Has a great widescreen option. Looks cool. But yeah, definitely the exception rather than the rule. So 16.9 CRTs, probably not worth it in 2024. So So this is cool. Let's see if we can find a race to play. A little bit hard to see the text and see what I'm selecting in the menu there. You can see my number plate, that's the main thing. AS drive on the left, of course, because Forza Horizon 4, we are British. That's why we like it. Not going to be doing this for very long. I don't want my lights to go off again. Can't really afford to blow the other studio light, now I'm down to 1. This game looks great. Whether you're driving around in the world or racing around like this, you could almost kind of convince yourself that you're watching a TV show. Like, there's not really much difference. Obviously you've got the heads-up display, you've got the arrows on the track and stuff like that, but you know, that aside, there you go, sit inside the car, pretend we're on Top Gear, except woke. Whoa, and so maybe slightly worse at driving. Yeah, definitely intended strat there. See, now playing it like this, with this viewpoint, even at 60 frames per second, you're really feeling the speed here. I normally play this on my other TV at, well, up to 120 frames per second, and capture device only captures 30 frames per second. You see, there's a massive difference between 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second, but I'm not really feeling a great deal of difference between 60 frames per second and 120, you know? This just looks and feels great. I'm actually getting a feel for the controls again, which is nice. Done! Yeah, okay, can we skip through all of the stuff? Yeah, okay, story things are happening. Great. Can I quit the game before my house catches fire?
With a proven record, who doesn't mind the cold? What do you say? All I need you to do is catch a train to Edinburgh. Turn around when it is...
New car to collect. Yes, I know, but fire hazard. Listen. There it goes. Now, I know the microphone picked up the sound of that fan whirring down there. Still going a bit. To be fair, it's quite hot. We're like upwards of 30 degrees today. So. But, you know, if your house can handle a power load, playing Forza Horizon 4 on a CRT is neat. It's not more than that. It's just neat. I think the more exciting use for this technology... Why are you whirring? Stop it. Calm down. Shh. I don't mind the PC fans going when I'm in game, but when I'm trying to talk to you, it's just rude. Neat as that is, the more exciting and less dangerous use of this technology is modern retro style games. So here's ZOOL redimensioned running on a CRT. And because ZOOL has one of the best soundtracks in any video game ever, I'm going to shut up for a bit. Cool, right? I'll link to Nostalgica's cover of that tune in the description that he made for me. It's really good, and I'm very grateful. But unfortunately, this is another one of those games that forces itself into widescreen. It doesn't support anything else. And you know, that's true of pretty much all 2D games. So 2D platform games are obviously designed to display so much stuff on the screen. Whereas with 3D games, how far you can see ahead is kind of more up to the camera, you know? So if we switch here to Ion Fury, put the screen back into non-widescreen, this is quite happy at 4:3.
Lucky I can't fit a grenade launcher in my bag.
This is a modern, new FPS, I don't know if modern is the right word for it, built on Ken Silverman's build engine. Made famous by Duke Nukem 3D, Blood and Shadow Warrior, and Redneck Rampage, I guess, if you're so inclined. And I love it. I love the build engine. I used to make levels for Duke Nukem 3D and Blood. It's one of my favourite 3D engines of all time. It's there's an awful lot you can do with the build engine, but it's also got this kind of restrictions breed creativity kind of feel where, you know, you have to kind of work around some of its limitations. And I love it. And that's why I get a big, lovely nostalgia feeling playing Ion Fury, because it was exactly the engine from the games that I used to play back in the day. Anyway, this looks cool on a CRT. The Cyberpunk style in the retro engine is just a great fit for it. Just all the colours, just the way it blurs out all the pixels, you know, you smooths it all out, you know? It does what CRTs do, and it looks great in this. Obviously the game wasn't designed with a CRT in mind. This was designed, you know, for modern monitors and everything, but it works great. Because of the graphical style, just lends itself quite well to this kind of display. You know, like Cyberpunk 2077, but even more so because it's legitimately an older engine that uses pixels and voxels. Less likely to burn your house down to boot. I enjoyed that, and the next game I want to show you is Horizon Chase Turbo. Now, I can tell from the mouse cursor there that this is not in 4:3. This is still 16:9. Yep, 1280 by 720. And this is a problem I had with this game and some other games as well. Moonlight tries really hard to force you back to widescreen resolutions, no matter what. Let's see if it. Yeah, so it's gone a little weird here. And if you're going to tinker around with this, definitely have like another way of controlling the computer you're streaming from. I can see from Parsec on here that although I've selected 640 by 480 in game, the PC is actually running 1280 by 720, and that's why it's boxed off at the sides there. Now, while connected with Parsec, I can force the display to 640 by 480. Well, I can force it to 800 by 600 because that's the most Windows lets you do, or the lowest Windows lets you do. But then, as you can kind of see, it's just kind of squished it into the corner there, which is of course not helpful. It's Moonlight, you know, it's not happy with non-widescreen with some things. Like you saw that Cyberpunk 2077 worked fine. Ion Fury did this time, but sometimes doesn't. Horizon Chase Turbo is always problematic. Always forces itself back to widescreen. But it can be done. I've done it. I will do it again. It's just getting smaller and smaller. Obviously ridiculous. We had it there. There we go. That's how I did it. Parsec to the rescue. Controlling the parsec, you can set it manually to a resolution from the client, and Moonlight will stop complaining about it and just let you do it. Fiddly as heck. Similar to Ion Fury, Horizon Chase Turbo is a retro sort of engine and a retro style game. Really suits the CRT very well. The bright colours look great on this. You know, if you're willing to put the time in to get it streaming in 4:3, you'll probably still enjoy the relief more than the game, to be honest. So yeah, Horizon Chase Turbo looks great, and most 3D games really should be quite happy in 4:3. Horizon Chase Turbo is. It's not their fault that Moonlight's a bit tricky with it. The game itself quite happy in 4:3, and most 3D games are. They've really got no excuse not to be, because it's just a viewport at the end of the day. Like in Forza Horizon 4, I guess a lot of it's down to sort of the menus and assets like that being really designed for 16:9 and filling up the screen, I'm guessing, you know. And even if it's just for the menus, it's not really worth, in 2024, putting the extra development time in to support 4:3 if it's fiddly to do so. But I think specifically for retro style games, it's worth it, because the market you're appealing to is this idiot who's still using a CRT TV in 2024. Now here's Ukulele. By the looks, running quite happily in 4:3. There's no option to do it in the menu, but by fiddling the resolution with Parsec, I've been able to do it. And to be honest, this is the first time that I've managed to do that. The script has me talking about what a shame it is that it's not possible to play Ukulele in 4:3 like the Nintendo 64 games it's paying homage to, but you can. I'm doing it. You know, he's not looking weirdly tall. He's a plump little ukulele. Yeah, and this is really cool. I even googled this, and I looked at forums, and everyone's saying this isn't supposed to work, but here it is. Is this the first time anyone's played Ukulele in 4:3 on a CRT? Ukulele is not my favourite game. I'd rather be playing Banjo-Kazooie. Even then, I was really more of a fan of Conker's Bad Fur Day. That was more my speed when that was current. But it's obviously a game that's, you know, a continuation of those Nintendo 64 collectathon platformers. And actually, being able to play it in 4:3 on my CRT TV, same TV that I used to play those Nintendo 64 games, in fact. Yeah, I'm digging this. This kind of... Right, Cyberpunk doesn't, Ion Fury and stuff like that doesn't, but I think this might justify the hassle. Not the whole, like, you know, overloading your circuits, almost setting your house on fire thing, but it justifies the faff of setting it up to do this, and I think this is a really nice way to experience Ukulele. I mean, don't simply take my word for it. I'm, as you can see, not very far into the game. Maybe later on I'll come across something that doesn't work in 4:3. Because that's the weird thing with this, right? If we go into the options screen, go into the display menu, the resolution, it thinks the resolution is 720 by 480. It's not, it's 640 by 480. And it only lets me select widescreen resolutions in this list. That's made it slightly sharper for some reason. Looks really good, actually. But yeah, this is definitely... Look at him. The chubby boy. This is definitely not 16:9, is it? If we put him into 16:9 on the TV, does he look ridiculous? Yes, that looks ridiculous. Ukulele's running in native 4:3, everyone. You might say I'm easily amused, but I am, at the very least, amused. I'll take it, and so should you. But Parsec's the hero here. Parsec lets you force whatever's running into a resolution it's not supposed to support, apparently. So, you know, my computer's over there. I'm controlling this with my laptop here. So Parsec is the secret that no one's figured out to Ukulele in 4.3. So looking at more modern retro games, I tried Animal Well and it worked, but was a disappointing experience because of the levels to which it aspired. There's a dev blog where the developer says they developed it specifically with 240p in mind to get that retro look, but then they made it widescreen only. I get that they have to, for game design reasons. It's the right thing to do. Making the gameplay better on more systems is more important than satisfying my personal lust for cathode ray tubes, but it is nonetheless a trade-off. There's also no way in the game to set a custom resolution, so getting it to actually output in 240p was beyond my abilities and the technology I have available. If it's ever ported to run natively on something connected to a CRT, like a Raspberry Pi or even the Wii, that would be lovely. But it'll probably still be 16.9, right? Celeste was also 16.9. Super Meat Boy, Freedom Planet, and you've already seen ZOOL. Basically, all of the modern 2D games only run in 16.9 because they're designed for it. Except one. Sonic Mania, yep, it'll run quite happily in 4.3. This is something the devs did deliberately as well, because it will even pan the screen appropriately during bosses or whatever to show you just what you need to see. This is one of the few games that was definitely designed with weirdos like me in mind. It streams pretty well too, except this isn't streaming. What you're seeing right now is running natively on the Raspberry Pi 4, and it runs great. No problems whatsoever in the main levels, and it looks absolutely glorious on a CRT TV from the mid-90s. I just love that the developers of this put so much work into making it look good in 4.3 on a CRT, even though it's only weirdos like me who still use them. So from the bottom of my heart, Christian Whitehead and Co., thank you so much for this gift. And I mean that, you know, as of right now, Sonic Mania is my favourite thing to do with the Raspberry Pi 4 and the RGB-Pi. No question. This is the best way to play this game. See, look, in this boss you've got a little bit less time to react to the missiles, but it's showing you what you need to see. You know, they put a lot of thought into the 4.3 support. I mean, if you're not playing Sonic Mania on a CRT, are you even really playing Sonic Mania? Really? You're a hungry baby! Oh no! Can't believe you're a hungry baby. It's not even a feeding time yet, it's in an hour. See, there's nothing about this that doesn't look like it was just designed for 4.3. No, it's a whole hour. It's a whole hour until you're wet food. Can you be good for an hour? She's on my retro gaming shelf. She does to intimidate me. Like, the positioning of the lives and score counters and all that even accounts for overscan. Like, CRT TVs never displayed the whole image, right? There was always a little bit left over at the side of the screen that you couldn't see, and that was called overscan. And everything back in the day obviously accounted for that. TV shows, video games, everything. And Sonic Mania. In fact, the only issue I found with playing Sonic Mania like this is that the Raspberry Pi does chug a little bit sometimes when there's a lot happening on the special stages. Only on the special stages. Everything else in the game runs flawlessly, and most of the time the special stages do as well. Just occasionally you will notice the odd stutter. Get in. We just cut off the bottom of the achievement there, but yeah. Sonic Mania is so good. Could just keep playing that all night. But no, that brings us on to talking about other ports that are supported within RGBPi OS. I kind of dig the Pico 8 Fantasy console. And here it is, in all its blocky glory, looking lovely on the CRT. This is Dinky Kong. Any resemblance to any other game is coincidental, etc. The thing is, and you can see the issue with Dinky Kong particularly well, is that the screen for the Pico 8 is square. I can't remember the resolution of it, but it doesn't divide neatly to sort of show the whole thing vertically on a 4x3 TV. So the top and the bottom are cut off. But otherwise this is kind of cool. The thing is with the Pico 8 and a lot of more recent sort of pixely things is that they're doing a kind of pixel art that people have nostalgia for if they use emulators. For those of us who remember playing NES and SNES and Mega Drive and whatever back in the 90s, we had CRTs to smooth out the pixels. So the pixel art aesthetic back then was not the same as the pixel art aesthetic today. You best. So actually stuff like this looks kind of weird on a CRT, you know? It's not really designed for it. So anyway, here's Doom, or Doom 2 in this example. And it runs fine. It's not perfectly formatted for the CRT. You know, little black bars top and bottom, but you know, it's Doom. It's great. I don't mind admitting that if you are going to play Doom on a CRT, this is probably a better way to do it than the SNES version. This is using the PR Boom core, and I found setting it up a little bit fiddly, but once I did, it's great. Got the twin stick controls working very much like the Switch port. Perfectly. But anyway, this is just Doom. Everything can play Doom. You saw the Thumby. And in terms of Doom on a CRT, the Wii has a perfectly serviceable port of Doom. So let's knock it up a notch with a blast from our Spice Weasel. It's Quake 2. Quake 2 looks great on a CRT and runs pretty well, but you can figure out what's missing, can't you? No CD audio. Well, we've got a workaround for that. Ah, there we go. I got this port from the RGBPi OS Discord, and like everything else RGBPi OS, it's locked down to heck. It's got some defaults that I personally wasn't happy with. For a start, it ran in widescreen. We know how I feel about that. And playing Quake 2 with a gamepad is bad enough, but with the controls as they were, you had to hold down a button the whole time to run, or just move incredibly slowly. But again, you know, this is a Linux device. Quick drop into the terminal, quick edit of a config file. We have always run. We have controls that make sense, even if I can't remember what they are. There it is. Amusingly, one of the settings I had to edit was called RGB-Pi restrict UI. It's not documented, as far as I can see, but a pretty good idea what that does. And it's also running in RetroArch. This is where, like, normally you only get the game menu and not the core options in the case of the Quake 2 port, but like I say, little edit of a config file, you've got everything there you need, you can tweak it to your liking. Perfectly fine.
Oh yeah, bam it again, Elzai, knock it up another notch.
Bam.
Good morning, and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System.
You see, under the hood, RGB-Pi OS is just Debian. So I had no trouble porting Zash 3D to this myself. I even compiled it on the Raspberry Pi 4. I installed all the development tools, downloaded the Zash 3D port, copied my Half-Life files on there, got it all compiled, good to go. And everything, like the resolution, the controls, it's all set up to work as I like it, because I compiled it, because I installed it, because I did the config files right from the off. With a little Linux knowledge, you can do an awful lot more with this than what the developers intended. Whether you want to compile your own software, or just tweak the installed software to your liking. And everything in between. See, that's the thing. They try and stop you from tinkering, but to get the best experience in certain things, you need to go under the hood just a little bit. You need to tinker. But that's the appeal of any Raspberry Pi based system usually, like any Raspberry Pi Linux based system. It's yours. This right here, this doesn't belong to the RGB-Pi developers. It's mine. And no one can stop me doing what I want to do on my computers. If I want to hack it to work just how I want it to work, that's on me. And that's why I get to play Half-Life on my CRT. That was an ordeal. Was it worth it? We'll let the view count decide that. I mean, I did get to use Moonlight to have a good time playing Sega's PC ports like Nights into Dreams, Crazy Taxi, the stuff that doesn't run quite so well on the native emulators on the Raspberry Pi 4. These all work fine, but if you're going to play Nights, you really want one of these. The Saturn 3D control pad just doesn't feel the same without it. And when I'm saying that these games worked, you saw a little bit of what was involved. You want to be in the same room as the PC you're streaming from, or you want to be able to remote control the PC some other way, such as with Parsec. You need to hop over and change the graphics settings and whatever all the time. One of the few games that worked just without an issue every time was Crazy Taxi. But that's one use of this. You can overcome a little bit of the Raspberry Pi 4's limitations when it comes to emulating some of these systems. Heck, you could just run emulators on your PC if you wanted. Stream the PC port of Mario 64 with ray tracing, why not? Do that with a RetroPad. Is that then the ultimate Mario 64 experience? Nah, possibly. I didn't get around to trying it. The Pi 5 would probably do a better job, but it's not supported by RGB-Pi. The Raspberry Pi Foundation made the unfortunate decision to remove the analog audio hardware from the Raspberry Pi 5, and all of these solutions kind of depend on it. Neither RGB-Pi nor Pi to SCART will work with the Pi 5. Recalbox RGB ZOOL sells an upgrade kit that basically just adds a USB audio device with a 3.5mm headphone jack, and then it's up to you to wire that into a SCART cable, or just plug it into some speakers separate to your TV. It doesn't sound great to me. The bigger problem though for our purposes, and for the RGBPi specifically, is that interlaced video is no longer supported on the GPIO header. That's the bit that this cable's connected to. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail about that, but it's a big loss of functionality. A desktop would be basically impossible, which you can also do with RGBPi-Extras. Moonlight would be much trickier. You wouldn't be able to see any text at all in really any of your modern games. And some of the emulators, like the Dreamcast, I guess wouldn't be running at 480i anymore, and yeah, you lose a lot of definition. Fortunately, the Pi 4 is perfectly fine for what I need it for, so I'm happy to stick with it for a while yet, and then see if future Raspberry Pi hardware revisions bring back that functionality. I hope they do. But anyway, as I said, there's a few of these different solutions to choose from to get analog video out of an RGB Pi. But there's another reason that I went for the RGB Pi specifically, and that's this. Built-in support for Namco's G-Con 2 light gun. And I just happened to have one of these lying around. Don't know why, think it was my sister's. And it's pretty neat, with some heavy caveats. Alright. Well, I tried Duck Hunt first and I was able to hit the ducks pretty well, though it was kind of weird to me playing it at 60 Hz. But I first noticed a problem when I started playing Lethal Enforcers on the SNES. I found I could shoot everything except for the bad guys. The G-Con 2 works by comparing what it sees from this lens here to the video signal it gets from this little composite cable, which I've plugged into a SCART splitter to connect to the RGB Pi. And if it sees black, it doesn't really know where it is. You can see here on the test screen that the aiming cursor just doesn't enter the darker parts of the screen at all. But you know, turn up the brightness on your TV, turn down your lights, and you've got terrible lighting for your YouTube video, but the gun works. The House of the Dead 2. I used to love this game back on the Dreamcast when I had it and two guns. Oh, you see from G's hair there that he's a bit grey. He's a bit greyer on this than he is on the Dreamcast original hardware. The reason for that is that the RGB Pi developers know that the gun con with their setup can't see blacks, can't see dark colours. So they adjust it. Some of the blacks come out grey. Looks a little bit weird, but it is necessary to make it work.
There's nothing you could do.
Nope. You see, and there's an example, right? It's not perfect, you know? I don't think I'm significantly worse at light gun games than when I used to play them more regularly back in the day on original hardware. I just think that this isn't as accurate as the Dreamcast light gun was. Even with the bad lighting and the tweaks, it's not perfect, but I used to have no trouble with these guys on the Dreamcast. And I used to be able to just hit them like while they were walking around rather than having to wait for it. I'm doing okay though. And like most of the game is fine for House of the Dead 2, right? Big old zombies taking up most of the screen. You know. I'm as accurate as I need to be. See there, the blacks just aren't. But when it comes to the bosses, including this first boss, I just can't hit it as reliably as I used to. And I don't think it's just my age that's the problem. The other thing I've noticed with this is I've tried all of the buttons and I cannot find my way past the gun con calibration screen in PlayStation games. In fact, the only solution I've found involves unplugging the gun, getting the controller back to player 1, and then reconfiguring the controls so I can press a button to... Once you get past that though, you're in the game. You see here with Point Blank, where you have to be a little bit more precise with your targets. You really feel the the lack of accuracy. And some of the games where you have a limited number of bullets are nigh on impossible. Also, starting some games you get this message. L-gun must be player 2. Alright, well what do I do then? The only way I figured out to do this is to go to the Raspberry Pi, unplug the light gun, let the controller take over as player 1, and then plug the light gun back in. Okay, so now I've got the pad as player 1. Plug in the gun again. It's gone back to player 1. What's frustrating about this is that it obviously knows for each system whether the gun has to be player 1 or player 2. Why can't it just change it? Instead of telling me that it needs to be something else, just do it, man. And the only difference is, there's no reason, right? The only difference is how RetroArch is configured and what goes into what port. I know it can change that in the background before launching a game, but it just doesn't. Right, let's try plugging in the light gun again. Like, to be fair, I've tweaked this, so maybe something I've done has made this not work as smoothly as it should. I don't know. Got to shoot specifically at the Duck Hunt logo on the menu to get it to register because the background's black, of course. But then, I can compare pretty much 1 for 1 with Duck Hunt. I play Duck Hunt a fair bit, you know, when I've got people over and whatever, we, you know, often break out the Duck Hunt. And I've got the NES Zapper original hardware, so I know I'm good at Duck Hunt. And I know I can hit them, so I can almost sort of compare 1 for 1. And it's not bad at Duck Hunt, you know? It's really not. It's not quite as good as the Zapper. It's not quite as accurate. I'm missing a little bit more with this. Well, okay, I'm perfect. But I'm missing a little bit more with this than with the Zapper. But, you know, it pretty much works as it should. Other emulators support it as well. You know, there's the SNES emulator supports the Nintendo Scope, but I've got a Nintendo Scope. You've seen it. You know why I've got a Nintendo Scope. And Randy Linden, you owe me for this Nintendo Scope, you mother. And this does not feel like a Nintendo Scope. Quite good for Lethal Enforcers on the SNES though. Take a bit of that. It's not too bad, the accuracy's a little off. But you can get Lethal Enforcers to work. It's a real shame that the Saturn emulation on this is poor. And that even if it was better, the Saturn RetroArch core doesn't have light gun support. Because, you know, Virtua Cop, original House of the Dead would be lovely. Once you're actually in the game and you're playing it, and the light gun works, it is a decent enough experience. So what about the RGB-Pi then? There are compromises, but really, it's as good a CRT retro gaming solution as you'll get for the price. The picture is great in every emulator it supports because of how it can switch frequency to match the content you're playing. The Pi 4 is not the best emulation device in the world, but it's good enough for most things that I want to play on a CRT. More recent games generally benefit from higher resolutions and higher colour ranges, and I'm not here to pretend otherwise. But for PlayStation and earlier, there's nothing like playing on a CRT, and this is the cheapest and easiest way to do that without collecting all the consoles. And even if, like me, you've already collected all the consoles, this is still a lot cheaper than a single SNES flash card. It's not original hardware, but it is original display technology, and with good quality emulation, that's most of the way there. There's a reason I don't own flash cards for any of my TV consoles. You see, this here's PAL country, and most developers were targeting NTSC. If I want to play the games as the developer intended, well, 50Hz mostly isn't going to do that. If I get an NTSC SNES, or mod my SNES for NTSC, then it's no longer the hardware as I remember it from my childhood. it loses a lot of the nostalgia factor. Besides, getting NTSC variants of all of my consoles either through modding or through buying them from the US is a few steps further than I'm willing to go right now. For games from my childhood that I want to play as I remember them, I'll be using the original PAL hardware with the original PAL cartridges. For everything else, where they're great games but nostalgia is less of a factor, RGBPi. I mean, no, it's not perfect. The light gun support is there, but it's disappointing. Controller support was also kind of hit and miss. I tried a couple of Bluetooth controllers, and one worked and one didn't. And in terms of USB controllers, I had success with the Retrobit Tribute 64 wireless, as I showed you, and the 8BitDo SN30 Pro Plus. But the 8BitDo Ultimate didn't work at all. I got one of those Famicom Switch controllers and I gave that a go, and with a little bit of fiddling, it does it, and it was great playing NES games with it, but it didn't work reliably every time, and it did take a little bit more reconfiguring to use it. But yeah, find a controller that works, probably a cabled one, something basic like an Xbox 360 controller or the aforementioned 8BitDo, and enjoy. Just don't expect everything to work. Overall though, for its stated aim of emulating consoles up to the PlayStation on your TV, with the minimal amount of fuss and the minimal amount of expenditure, it's a great success. The emulators are pre-installed, the folder structure you need is there for you, you put your ROMs on the SD card or the USB stick and it'll just work. And if that's all you want from this, you never have to drop into a command line or edit a config file or anything like that. And that's definitely to the developer's credit. But if your setup's just slightly weird in any way, such as my Wi-Fi network, or there's more you want to do with it, be prepared to tinker. And the experience will never be quite as smooth as it was out of the box, with the built-in capabilities of the lovely front end that it provides for RetroArch as standard. You absolutely can tinker though, and you'll probably want to, which makes the developer's decision to lock down root access such a strange one to me. You don't even get all of the security advantages since the entire interface is running as root anyway. It's as though they just made it a little bit harder for me to do what I want with my device for no reason, and not even all that much harder. I'm disappointed by that philosophy, but I'm glad I was able to fix it in a technical sense. And of course there's a link to RGBPi-Extras in the description. RGBPi-Extras also lets you unlock all of the options in RetroArch, which are usually locked down in RGBPi-OS. That's at your own risk though. RGBPi-OS does a good job of replacing a lot of the options you'll need in RetroArch with settings in its own interface. I like that a lot, but there are omissions. For example, you have a nice interface to set up your controller inputs, but when I wanted to use my Tribute 64, it didn't support all the buttons the Tribute 64 has, like all of the 4C buttons plus B and A. Standard RetroArch does, so when I unlocked the RetroArch menus, I was able to set it up in there and just had a great time with it. And playing Nintendo 64 with all the buttons kind of seems like a fairly normal thing that someone might want to do. With the somewhat limited interface, nice though it is, it's just another problem that you have to tinker your way out of. But when you find yourself using it in a use case the developers predicted, or you've done your tinkering and you start actually playing with it set up just how you like it, it works really well. Overall, I'd rate it a, this is nice, I like it. The question you're asking is, Bill, I know nothing of Linux. Do I want this? And I think the answer is still yes, and I'll tell you why. This is still the easiest way to get your emulators on a CRT. You write the image to the SD card, you put the games on either the SD card or a USB stick, either with the computer or over the network, and you just start playing your games. You'll have a good time. And then you'll wonder, what else can I do with this? And then, very quickly, you'll learn a bit about Linux. That's how retro gaming gets your life skills. Then, if you're anything like me, you'll spend more time jibbling about with the software than actually playing any games on the thing, but you'll have just as much fun. Maybe even more. So how are you playing your retro games? What's hooked up to your CRT? Sound off in the comments. Do the liking and subscribing and all that good stuff, and generally, have a good time. And thanks for joining me on the Retro Sofa. Say bye-bye, Minerva. Say bye-bye. Say bye-bye, Minerva. And that's a wrap. And that feels good. Nude, mother.